again as well. And so I think we're back from the in-camera section. I think we're received some clarification from administration on the different segments here. Councillor Thiessen, did you have a motion arising?
Yes, I did, Mayor Given. I would move to amend Councillor Minhas's motion on line 10 to reflect a reduction, I guess, in addition to our overall budget of $100,000 and lessen that line item to $581,000 and so many $100. Just speaking to that motion, I understand that this has a lot to do with our community programming around the environment and making sure that we achieve certain regulatory compliances. For me, it's the price for the future. It's something that we want to be conscious and aware of. It's something that our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, even called a $1 trillion industry. And part of creating a $1 trillion industry in our community and across our country is by raising awareness and consciousness amongst the people within our community. And for that, it's a small price to pay. I would hate to make this cut and in a year or two or a future council have to hire out consultants and pay double or triple what this is actually going to cost us. This is an important service, and just to quote our CFO from earlier today, the basis behind this motion is to fuel resources for the results of tomorrow, and that's the future that I want to invest in, and I hope that council can be in agreement so that it's a small portion of the overall large chunk of $681,000. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. So Councillor Thiessen's amendment, just so we're all on the same page, would be to amend Councillor Minhas's motion to reflect a figure of a reduction of $581,376, just so we're all clear. And that would retain, essentially, the effect of the motion would be to retain additional resources within the department. Okay, so we're all clear on Councillor Thiessen's motion. Any other discussion or debate on the motion? I will say that I support the amendment. I think the city has a role to play, not in solving the community's environmental problems, but in acting as a backbone organization and a force multiplier. I think that this kind of service out in the community allows us to rally the troops in many different areas and to deliver better results for our community, not by doing everything on behalf of the community, but by enabling the community to act on their own behalf. And so I see this as a backbone organization, and I don't see it as a convenience level of service. I see this as that basic backbone structure level of service. And so I will support Councillor Thiessen's motion. I absolutely can get behind the $580, nearly over $500,000 in reductions in this area, but I think that backbone capacity is an important functionality for the city and for the community. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Margaret. Just a question for Director Glavin on this. Do we have any key performing indicators of what value this does add to our community before I make a decision on this? Is there any metrics around that if we did eliminate this?
Director Glavin.
Thank you, Mayor Given. The organization has begun collecting key performance indicators on this. I don't have them in front of me at this time, and I know some of them, I believe some of them are annual in their basis. However, it appears as though Councillor Thiessen may have them at his disposal.
So administration doesn't have them. Councillor Platt, are you?
I'm just asking a question so we can get an answer.
Sure.
My word comes from.
Councillor Thiessen, do you have the KPIs on this area?
I actually do. There's quite a few KPIs. In fact, it goes through 3 different focus areas, and there's 5 different goals, and so several different KPIs. So I guess I'll just read the KPIs as I flip the pages. First KPI is the city will have installed 150 kilowatts of alternative energy generation efficiency upgrades by 2022 to obtain carbon neutrality by 2030. To implement the Energy Improvement Act, the KPI on that one is not available there. Sorry, my apologies. And the other ones are to participate in regional water strategies to ensure that our water resources are taken care of, to monitor operational impacts to water quality, improve corporate energy efficiency, implementation plan to be completed by March 2022 to allow for inclusion in the 2023 to 26 budget cycle, wetland riparian protection. By the end of 2021, amendments will be presented to Council regarding wetland riparian setbacks as a KPI, reduce greenhouse gases according to our FCM agreement that Council approved, to ensure the health of our ecosystems locally and regionally. Annual training will be given and occurred by end of each year, 2019, 20, 21, and 22. To maintain corporate environment management systems, results of the audit process will be included in the annual environmental report by the end of each year. To conduct external eco-plan audits and to engage the community on environmental initiatives. And programs are reviewed annually to see a steady increase of participants, including returnees.
Okay.
Yep. Sure. Go ahead, Councillor Platt.
Thanks for that, Councillor Thiessen. I guess maybe a question back to, maybe it's a director, maybe it's going to be Councillor Thiessen again, but just with the KPIs that were mentioned there, and there's definitely some good ones, would the organization still have the capacity to reach these, to achieve these if we did this reduction? And my other question is what role do we expect Aquaterra to play, as we're a major shareholder in this, regarding the water strategies of our community?
Director Glavin.
Thank you, Mayor Given. The KPIs that Councillor Thiessen shared with everyone are the specific ones within the business plan, and then there's two additional KPI that are measured annually that we've accepted as the reporting requirements for that council would see regarding electricity consumption, the index and surface water quality, which would be typically the Bear Creek corridor was where we do a lot of the testing in that. Regarding fulfilling the KPIs within the business plan, if we were to not do all of the outreach activities that we have currently budgeted in the plan, some of the KPIs would be unlikely to be achieved. And as far as the Aquaterra component of that, I know that on typically anything to do with water quality that affects our drinking water, they're involved on similar advisory boards or committees that we are independently of us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor. Given a question for Director Glavin. Just getting it here. In the comments, it mentions that the provincial and federal legislation compliance will be maintained. I'm curious if there's any indication that the provincial legislation compliance may change in the near future, which in then turn may mean that we are in excess of compliance.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. I'm not aware of any immediate changes that will reduce our liability in this area.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Clayton. So we are still on Councillor Thiessen's amendment to Councillor Minhas's motion. So we're voting on Councillor Thiessen's amendment to change the figure to be 581,376. Councillor Bressie.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Given. Just a piece of information for council that I love you guys to consider is, I don't know how important Mighty Peace Watershed is to you folks, but it's a recent appointment that I received, and if I don't get proper staff support on that, I'm not going to be representing us well. They're into that appointment and learning how technical it is, and I am very nervous about representing you folks on that if I'm not getting proper staff support. And I don't know how this affects it, but that's a big worry I have, is that organization us losing say in if we're relying on unexperienced politicians to help represent us there. So a piece of information for you folks.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Councillor Platt.
Thanks, everyone. Just on Councillor Bressie's comment, then, is that something that we wouldn't have support for then if we made this reduction, or would there still be support for whatever council was appointed to that position?
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. Similar to a number of the other adjustments we proposed today, any of this reduces our capacity and flexibility to be responsive to any of the needs of council or the community. So in this case, if there were specific questions or guidance that our council representative were looking for, there's just less capacity in order to properly consult.
Just another question, because it's not an appointment I've had. Is Aquaterra a member of this Peace Watershed Alliance as well?
I couldn't answer that definitively, but I believe yes.
Councillor Thiessen was our previous appointee, and I see him saying that Aquaterra is there as well. Yeah. Okay. Any other discussion or debate on the amendment? No? I don't see anybody in the queue. Then so I will go to Councillor Thiessen to close on his amendment.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given, and thank you, Council, for hearing out this discussion, and thank you, Director Glavin, for pointing out what the impacts are on this one. I think the environment is truly our greatest resource. We can talk about oil and gas, we can talk about water, we can talk about land, but it's all encompassed underneath the environment. The environmental services and the capacity to educate council and to keep council abreast as to impacts on some of our decision making as well as our regional decision making, such as the Mighty Peace Watershed, are just core functions that I like to have in-house, and core functions that I would like to utilize and tap into whenever we're thinking forwardly, when we're looking at alternative energy strategies, whenever we're looking at what our setbacks on our top of banks are supposed to be, or how to preserve wetlands and ensure that the mandated legislation that are handed down to us by the federal and provincial government are adhered to. I like having capacity in certain areas, and this is a future-focused area. This is one that also educates and our public and raises up future stewards for the environment. So I think it might be reckless to cut this specialization out of our budget, out of our organization. The programming itself is invaluable and something that I know the schools tap into quite a bit. I'm not sure what all the impacts are, but I worry about our city scrub potentially being impacted. It helps keep our community clean. There's probably about 100 different areas that the Environmental Services Department touches with their programmings and with their expertise. It's a small line item. We're looking to achieve 3.7 out of a proposed $6 million on this green sheet of cuts. $100,000 isn't going to impact that greatly, and we can still achieve the ends to our goals that we set before today. So I plead with each and every one of us, when you vote, please vote for the future you want to see. And I hope that includes environmental services within the city of Grande Prairie.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. So we'll call for the vote on Councillor Thiessen's motion. The vote is, what we're voting on is his amendment, whether or not you agree with having the number be 581,000 rather than 681,000. So everybody's clear on what we're voting for on Councillor Thiessen's amendment? Okay, I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Before I display the results, is everybody comfortable that they saw? I know we're doing a couple of, you know, this is a motion to reduce the amount that we're cutting. So it's not necessarily always clear everybody's comfortable that their vote was reflected properly. Okay, I'll display the results. That motion does carry, so the main motion has been amended. So we're back to Councillor Minhas's motion as amended to reduce this area by $581,376. Is there any discussion or debate on the main motion as amended? I don't see anybody ringing in. Then I will call for the vote on Councillor Minhas's motion to reduce this area by $581,376. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor Minhas.
Yeah, I'd like to move the motion for line 9 to be eliminated, to stay 350 to clean in the driveways. Okay. I can speak a little bit onto this reason, and we heard a lot of comments doing that since we started this cleaning driveway. There's a big issue is for the safety, because and when the snow is piled up on the front of the driveways, and some single mother or old people, they have to get out and clean it. It's a safety hazard and hurting, and also people get out from the garage and pushing the car, and they don't know the snow pile is already there and damaging the vehicles and stuff. So it's a big benefit to the community to keep that $350 in the community.
So yeah, so we need to be really clear. The motion, yeah, so eliminating 9.9 would reduce this service. And if there's not a council member that's going to make that motion, I'll make it. But so was your intention, Councillor Minhas, to take out $350,000, which is what does the driveway cleaning? You just spoke about leaving the drive.
Not the minus. Continue the service.
Okay, so let's not confuse ourselves altogether anymore. Let's keep on the same process. The motions that we're making are to confirm cutting something. We don't make a motion to confirm leaving something. Okay, in this round, we're making motions to cut things.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think that was your intention, Councilman House. Is that true?
I want to keep it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So is there any other council member that wanted to make a motion on line item number 9? So I will make a motion using my ability within the procedure bylaw to make motions, which I have now. I will use that sparingly, Council. I would move that Council approve administration's recommendation to remove $350,000 from the budget to remove the driveway snow removal program. Period. In speaking to that motion, I've heard council members say about other items very early on that administration's recommendation we should be comfortable with. I certainly would agree with that in this case. I would just use this as an example of where you might have a different opinion, where administration's recommendation is up to some political determination. And I think that that's the case with every one of these items. I would observe that this is a fairly significant dollar cost that really only benefits probably less than half of our community in terms of our residents, and it is the definition of a convenience level of service. This is the type of thing that says we will go above and beyond what many or most other communities do at an added cost. And so in difficult times where we're saying there are other things that we can do without, I think this is a Cadillac level of service that we can reasonably do without. And I guess I would just ask other council members to think about what is core and non-core, what is convenience, and I would submit that this is the definition of convenience. Open for discussion and debate. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor Gibbon, I encourage council to not support this motion. Although it may be considered a convenience, living in a winter city has lots of stigmatism to it in regards to the expectation of comfort. And so I think that overall, this may not impact half of our community, fair enough. I still think that there's many, many other services that we provide much, much more money to that also impact less than half. There's facilities that we have that are substantial that people have never been into. There's organizations that we support that people may never use their services from. And this is one that simply is a nice to have, but I'm willing to support it because of the fact that people in Grande Prairie deserve something for living in a winter city that is, in my opinion, a small amount of money. So I encourage council to not support this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Bressie.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Given. I think that in the future, this is something that I would be open to maybe cutting. I think that a deficit of our current snow removal programs is I think we actually do a really good job of removing snow. I think we do better than a lot of other communities. But to my knowledge, ever since this new system was put into place, including windrow removal, which was an add-on a couple years later, there's never really been a robust review of how are we doing snow removal? How does it compare to other communities? Are we giving a service that our community wants? Do they want less of it? Do they want more of it? In the context of a review like that I think we should do sometime, I'd be open saying, hey, let's get rid of this. But something I'd be asking in a review like that is how are we going to take care of people with disabilities in our community? And that's my biggest concern with this in terms of for able-bodied folks, yeah, it's a Cadillac service, but for people that have mobility issues, this is really essential to a lot of them getting in and out of their home. And if we don't have something like a pylon system ready to go or some way to help those vulnerable residents out, then I can't support this. So in the future, I think we should have a conversation about this as well as other Cadillac aspects of our program. But today I can't support this because we haven't considered the people who would be most impacted by it.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Again, I appreciated that CLT sat down, our corporate leadership team sat down and went through this list, and I'm going to be in great support of most of it. This is one that I don't support. I think when we got our feedback from the community, this is one of the areas that we got a lot of conversation, a lot of feedback saying this is something people generally really appreciated it. And so I haven't heard a lot of negative comments about this. So I'm fine with this staying in, and I won't be supporting the motion. I think this is a good use of $350,000 of the community's money. I agree with Councillor Bressie's comments. I'd love to see us have a more robust conversation about this process in general, but that's not happening today. So for today, I need to not support this motion, and I urge the rest of us to leave this in because I do think this is actually a safety concern as well. So it hits a lot of levels to me, and I can appreciate why CLT put it in here because we asked them to try to achieve a number, but for me, I can't support it.
Thanks, Councillor Plott. Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, Mayor Given, thank you very much. I won't be supporting this. I look at this community as a young community as well. We have seniors. As a young community, the husband is usually maybe working out of town, comes home, he's up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to work in either the oil field or the forestry, and he leaves a home a wife with children, and if she needs to take the kids to the hospital or a medical or the school, and the graders left a windrow across it's just very, very difficult. And who's going to look after the kids while she's outside if we're talking newborn kids? So I've heard nothing but keep this in. There's lots of other things that we can cut, but this is Grand Prairie's a winter city. All the stuff that I'm saying has been said already, but we've got accustomed to this, and we expect it, and nothing worse than coming home and your vehicle's the one that you want to take, or you have to leave, for instance, and there's a 2-foot or 18-inch windrow in that, and no, I will not support this.
Okay.
This
Thanks,
is
Councillor.
money well spent.
Thanks, Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I appreciate all the conversation. I actually have a question, if I may ask a question to administration. If this were to be a reduction that would be undertaken, how would we deal with the persons of disabilities, the elderly or otherwise? When we first changed this from the Cadillac system to or plowing in your driveways, we had a pylon program. It's my understanding that once we continued with this program, we left out the pylon program because we don't need it anymore. Would that still be a function of the city's snow removal?
Dr. Glavin?
Thank you, Mayor Given. So if we did exercise this option in order to service any of the populations that are identified council that you'd want to be exempt from this, where either we provide the service or give them some sort of monetary contribution in order for them to pay, we'd have to have some sort of registry system in place, which would reduce the amount of savings in this area. So anytime we add another level of bureaucracy or whatever it may be for this, and we exempted some people, we would still have to retain some of the capacity to deliver that service. So it would not, in effect, be a $350,000 cut if we had exemptions to it.
So I guess just simply put, no, we don't have a pylon program for seniors or disabled persons.
Dr. Glavin?
Currently, everyone receives the same level of service.
Perfect. All right, in talking to that, I might even entertain a motion in the future to double this. I'm not going to belabor everybody with my support for the program, but I think it is a good program, and I think this is a good opportunity for us to have discussion, debate on a variety of things. We'll be voting in support of keeping, not keeping it on this list, I guess keeping the service going. That's a yes or no. It's confusion all the time, but that's why we have the mayor to show us the way. But I would, I'm with probably the rest of council to keep this service in line. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. So I don't see anybody else in the queue, so I'll close. I would say, first off, this is a motion to reduce the $350,000. If you want to cut this, then you vote in favor of the motion. If you want to retain it, then you vote no, don't cut this money. And I would just say to council that absolutely we are in a budget situation which calls for us to make difficult decisions. I appreciate that many folks around the table value the service and have heard from residents who value the service. My experience has been that it is roughly 50-50. And I have heard from people that received the new service that appreciated it. But I think what we will find is that every year there are people who are dissatisfied with snow removal service. And I don't believe that this Cadillac level of service is a reasonable use of dollars at this time. And so that's why I'd encourage council to really think about why administration chose to recommend this. And at minimum, whether you support this motion or not, to apply that same level of thinking and discernment to all the other recommendations for administration about whether you believe that they are things that are valued by residents or not, because just because they made this list of things that are practical and possible to implement doesn't necessarily mean they're not valued by residents or some portion of residents, because as it's very clear with this program, this doesn't provide a broad general benefit in the same way a recreation facility does. It provides a very specific benefit to individual property owners at a cost to other property owners who receive no direct benefit. So for those reasons, I would encourage council to support the motion. I will close discussion, debate, and call for the vote. And on the vote, if you are in agreement with cutting this, then you vote in favor. If you wish to retain it, then you vote no. Please vote. Thank you. We've got everybody's votes registered. We're all comfortable with those went in the way that we thought they were supposed to. That motion does not carry. And if there aren't any other motions arising in this service area, then I'll just sort of do a scan to make sure. Then we will move into our community services area, which takes up items 13 to 29, I think. And so the director has his hands full.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Given. So I think it is 17 items that I'll guide you through initially. And Stephanie's here as well to answer any questions that I'm unable to. And if neither of us can, then she can assist in getting quick responses so we can keep moving along. So starting with number 13, it's Eastlink Center Management, Administration and Programming. So to achieve the reduction, we would modify the instructor skill set to reduce the number of guarding hours during lessons. We would ensure we have the proper ratio of lifeguards to patrons, and that would be an efficiency in scheduling. And then also reduce the in-service training to 4 times per year from 6. We would still meet our requirements, but we won't be exceeding the requirements is what we're currently doing. We would also adjust the shift schedule for the operational service leads to 10-hour shifts, and that would allow us to reduce the security hours that we have to pay for from it's an outside contract. And then also reduce the fitness classes from 70 to 60 and use the operational service leads instead of the instructors for the setup and the takedown of the classes. So it's just a more efficient use of resources. And we would also install an indicator light at the top of the water slide. And that would be an efficiency for scheduling as well. And then we would remove the carpet from the child and youth programming room to create a more multi-purpose use space and increase revenues as well by doing that. And then we have a number of smaller items, including just the procedure for locking and securing the deck with appropriate staff and renting out lockers, increased number of personal trainers, and a couple other smaller items. And so then moving on to number 14, it's labeled the same, but this actually has, it's an efficiency with our custodial schedule. And the risk with doing that is we would reduce the number of hours of custodial presence in the facility. And then we would have the risk of the facility not being quite as clean as you've seen in the past. And perhaps the garbage cans aren't emptied quite as often. But we think minimal impact. And then moving on to number 15, it's the Coca-Cola Center. We would adopt an alternative service model for food and beverage. And that would, we would achieve a savings, plus we would also see some increased revenues. And that's a model that we're using currently at Revolution Place and Day Bar recently, and we think it's very doable. Then number 16 is parks, cemetery maintenance. We, just with making some changes there, we can achieve some savings. The result would be you might see longer grass, more weeds, the presence of more weeds. And another added risk, I guess, beyond our control is depending on the weather. If it's a lot of rain, we may have the grass is growing better, so you may notice more of a difference depending on the weather. We also think we can change some of the procedures in the cemetery. Right now, I think what the staff have done in the past is they remove flowers from the grave sites, and then they replace them after they cut, so we could change some of our processes, which would make us more efficient. And then number 17 is Parks Administration and Operations. So we have a couple vacant positions right now that we don't plan on filling. And then we would also, we're contemplating amalgamating the Parks Department with the Transportation Department. And we think we can achieve savings in that regard as well. And probably deliver a more effective product is what our plan is. And then moving on to number 18. This is mowing of view lots, roadside ditches, irrigation, and weed control. So it would be reduced maintenance of green spaces, the trees, the flower beds, and it would translate into a reduction in the level of service that we're providing. So you may see longer grass, more weeds in the flower beds. Another option we're looking at is using a chemical option for the flower beds versus hand picking. We could increase our spraying. And chances are with this reduction, we'd also, we wouldn't have the funds to plant as many trees as we have in the past. And then also less irrigation systems and less watering. And this could affect the flowers in the downtown area as well, but recently I heard that there was a bit of a concern about they didn't look as good as they have in the past, so we'll certainly bring that to the attention of our staff and see what we can do to correct that for the next growing season. And it would also involve a reduction in the number of leased vehicles and reducing our tree spade stump grinding program, and also the number of flowers that we purchase on an annual basis. Then number 19 is day bar administration. You've heard me speak about this in the past, and it's been in the media a little bit about the elimination of childcare services. So the plan there is an end date of June 30th, 2020. And so it's a little bit later than my initial recommendation, but I think that's the best route to proceed on that one. And then number 20 is the Montrose Cultural Center. Just with making some changes there, we have a new tenant in the kiosk, and we're anticipating greater revenue sharing through the catering process that we can now have over at MCC. Then moving on to number 21 is transit. So we'll look at, we'll identify alternative service delivery options resulting in, it'll be a decreased service level. And some examples of what we would do is remove Route 7. And right now it's, all we're doing on Route 7 is the school delivery trip. And then we'd also look at reducing evening hours of service on routes 1 to 4. And that would translate into our last trip leaving the downtown core at 9:15 versus what we're currently doing at 10:15. And then also reducing the evening service hours on Route 5 and leaving the Prairie Mall at 6:35 p.m. versus 7:35 p.m. except for Thursday and Fridays, and then it would remain at the current time. And then also reduce evening service on Route 6, which is currently leaves GPRC at 7:21, and we would, currently leaves at 8:21. We would change it to 7:21, so a reduction of an hour. So we do anticipate the users would see a decline in service. Some of the current users may look at other options for getting around the community. And if that did happen, that could also translate into reduced revenues for us. And then number 22 is also related to transit. So with the realignment of admin and supervisory staff, including looking at we have a couple of vacant positions right now. And with us taking on DTS, formerly DTS, now we call it accessible transit, we can find some efficiencies there as well. So. And then number 23 is a community rec development. And what we would do is work with through the SCORES agreement with our school districts that we share facilities with, that we would implement. Our target would be $20,000 in revenue. Right now the city does the bookings for the facilities, and it's all on our cost. We would try to get the cooperation of the school districts that they'll share the cost with us. And our target is to start at $20,000 and then increase it in the coming years. And number 24 is it's in regards to community group funding. And this is actually, it's a removal of a budget item that was actually, it was duplicated in another budget. So it's, by removing it from community group funding, it's a savings of $28,000. So there really is no impact to the program. Number 25 is the large scale tourism funding. So we're recommending a reduction from $200,000 to $50,000, so a savings of $150,000. And it would just be reduced funding for these the groups that do apply. And we only have several apply that per year, or apply for the funding per year. And we would focus on the groups. We'd provide recommendations through committee to the groups that we feel need the funding to get them to where they should be, and not recommend it be provided to the groups that are self-sustainable. Number 26 is in regards to the museum. So we'd recommend reducing the museum hours of operation based on utilization rates, and that's just more efficient use of our staff, and more efficient use of the facility as well. You know, we'll be open when the need is there, and we'll be closed when the need isn't there. And number 27 is a pavilion administration. Same thing there, is a reduction in the hours of operation, and the impact could be we may have to increase security hours a little bit with the contract security company we do utilize. It'll be less access for the public to washroom facilities, and then less convenience as well, just to like a warm place to go into, I guess, to sit for a period of time. And number 28 is the Muskasippi Park, the family programs. So you've heard me talk a little bit about that in the past. So we'd recommend discontinuing 5 programs. It's a teachers convention camp, and I do have attendance numbers for that camp. There was 19 and 20 spots filled. And the spring break camp, we had 20 of the 20 spots filled. And then other 3 programs we're looking at. The average attendance for Muskie and Friends Camp and the 2 Musketeers summer camps was about 13 participants per session. The capacity is 20 participants per session. So based on this, and based on discussions with staff in sports wellness culture, or sports development, wellness and culture, they feel these programs, they're delivered by different agencies in town, or they don't feel there would be a gap by reducing these in their estimation. So we did increase the fees for some of the programs as part of the fees and charges review, but still, based on the increased fees, the recommendation from the staff is to eliminate the programs. And then number 29 is the Muskasippi Park special events. So we're looking at the reduction, or a reduction in the number of free community events. We would recommend maintaining Canada Day, the Easter event, the Folk Tales, and the New Year's Day events. And then there's it's an elimination of about 13 other events. And again, that's in discussion with the staff that create the events and host the events and work the events. They feel that if we focused on these main 4 events and worked with our other facilities in the community, that again, there won't be a gap created. I believe that's it, so I'm open to any questions.
Okay, questions for Director Miller? Councillor O'Toole.
I don't have any questions as per se, but I think if we broke these down into several units, and when time comes to make a motion, I'd like to make a motion involving 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, the very first slide.
Okay, so when you're ready to do that, we'll come to you first for motions. Councillor O'Toole, Councillor Bressie.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Given. A couple questions. The first one is relating to 18 in terms of mowing U-lots, roadside ditches, irrigation, weed control. It's a really tough one for me to judge what the impact in the community would have, and I'm very open to trying it this year. But my concern is if we see a really big impact, then I might want to change my mind next year. So I'm wondering, in terms of if we did make these cutbacks in number 18 this year and decided, whoa, that was too big of a cutback, would this be scalable back up in 2021 if council decided to pull back 2020 but said we wanted again in 2021?
Thanks, Mayor Given. I think we could certainly do that. We had that arrangement for this current year as well, that when the parks manager, the plan we had, and we said if it went sideways, then talk to us and we would address it by ramping back up. So I'm sure we could do the same in the future.
Councillor Bessie?
And then also a question about number 23 in terms of the scores agreement. So if we implemented booking fees, would that be passed on to school boards, or would that be passed on to the people that are actually making the bookings and paying for bookings?
Thanks, Mayor Given. In talking to Karen McGriskin, our intent was to pass it on to the school boards.
And then one more, if I may.
Yep.
Just to make sure for number 29, I just want to make sure I got the 4 events to be retaining right. So it was Canada Day, Easter, Folktales, and New Year's would be retained?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Just on that, so the information that we have from 17 to 4 events, I count Canada Day, Easter, and New Year's as 3. Or is Easter Folktales 2 different events?
Sorry, it's I'll clarify. Canada Day is one event, Easter event is another, and then Folktales, and then New Year's Day events.
Is the Folktales the cemetery tour, or the what? Councillor Friesen, you're aware of that one?
Thank you. That would be the stories, the folk tale stories that are down at the museum just prior to. It's an October event usually, and it's storytellers throughout the museum area.
Thank you.
Other questions, Councillor Palat?
Thanks, Mayor Given. Just in regards to the cemetery, I'm just wondering, similar to Councillor Bressy's, if we got partway into this and realized that maybe we went too far, just looking at the reserve on that one, it says, under the application, it says these funds may be used to cover approved operating and capital projects that were not started. Would we have any ability to use the reserve for that if we felt partway through the year that we had went too far and that we weren't impressed with the look of what our cemeteries look like?
Thanks, Mayor Given. Susan has said that it's actually for perpetual care. I think what we could do is, with our plan with amalgamating with transportation, we're going to have numerous resources that we can call on, and the manager of the combined department could easily redeploy resources as needed. If we fail behind in one area, then I think they could focus on that area and try to correct the deficiency.
Okay. And then regarding the community group funding, as we're scaling it back over time, could you let me know how that would impact the library? Because it currently is part of the community group funding. Would there be a reduction in library, or is just an overall reduction, and council would still be debating every year of where those funds would be allocated?
Dr. Miller?
Thanks, Mayor Given. So if I can just clarify, are you talking about the slide that was on the earlier presentation about the 10%?
Yeah.
Well, I think we would separate out library funding and gallery funding, perhaps, and then the rest, it would be an overall reduction of 10%, perhaps, whatever number council decided on. But we don't have all the information yet, so our plan there is working with finance. Shauna Hansen's been doing some research on it already for us, and she's connected with our comparable communities, being Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, Red Deer, Airdrie, St. Albert, and they've shared some information, but not all the information. So within a couple months, I would bring a report back through the appropriate committee at either corporate services or community services, and with a recommendation on where we should be. I think right now it's just too early to say what our recommendation would be.
Okay, thank you. Can I, and just one more, just regarding the transit, just are most of these just because of the utilization at that time and these changes in potential routes and times of the routes? Is it just because they're not being well utilized? Is that a safe assumption, or?
Thanks, Mayor Given. I think it's difficult to say. We this past year we've started collecting more data on the times when rides are being taken on the transit buses. I think this is a recommendation from Mr. Harvard. He feels this is, if we have to achieve savings, this is the recommended area where we should be doing it. Okay. And that's probably the best information I could share right now.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Just a couple questions here. Thank you, Director Miller. In regards to the Muskogee Park special events, so of the ones cutting, I guess there's 17. I was quite shocked that we did 17. I could only count 6, but of the 2 that weren't mentioned, Family Day and Halloween, those would be cut as well from programming.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Given. Yes, they would be. I have the list of the other events if council would like to hear them.
Sure.
This is as provided by sports development staff to me, so it would involve the Family Day events, the Fiddler's Jamboree, the International Museum Day, the Canada Day Kickoff, which is now, we'll combine that with Municipal Government Day and Canada Day celebrations, Heritage Day, the Alberta Cultures Day, and a note here that we would support other events through rental spaces, and then a Halloween event, and the notation from staff is that there's already many other events in the community to celebrate Halloween, so they don't see a huge impact there. And then a Christmas event. Right now, Rev Place has an event, so the recommendation is that they don't have to do a similar event. So
that's interesting. Just a comment, because I've organized volunteers year over year for at least Family Day and Halloween, and the pavilion is packed. People love that event, and I think it's the only haunted house that is provided in the entire community that you can walk through. So I don't know if they're looking at cutting that, but I guess we can discuss that later. I guess my other question is, if I may, in regards to transit and the realignment of admin supervisory staff, line item 22. I guess one of my notes was, I guess, is this wise? We're increasing our Disabled Transportation Society is come under that fold of transit to eliminate positions and dispatchers. Is it efficiency or capacity? Will we have enough capacity to serve and still be efficient at the same time?
Thanks, Mayor Given. In talking to Mr. Harvard, he's confident that what he's recommended is doable and we'll still have capacity. I know we're talking about, I was talking to Mr. Burke recently about with the contact center, there might be an efficiency we can gain there too, that they can take some of the calls that our dispatchers are currently taking. So it's just a better utilization of resources over here in City Hall, plus at transit with the dispatchers.
Okay, and just one more question on item 21. I know Mr. Harvard's not here to answer, but the potential to cut services for transit to the college. I know some people who actually have class sometimes till about 8 o'clock at night. If they were transit riders, they would no longer have a ride home. They'd probably have to cab home 2 or 3 times a week. Do we know, or did we follow up with the college to see how late their evening classes go?
Thanks, Mayor.
Hard question for you. I know.
I'm sorry, I don't have that answer, and I don't think Stephanie has that one either. But at her fingertips. But
okay, no, that's okay. I'm sure we'll have time to get through this list, and if there's an answer, we can get that then. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I had one question with respect to the Eastlink Centre. I suppose it's really on line 14, but Director Miller, can you remind us around the Eastlink Centre's goals or KPIs and targets around use of the facility? Does the business plan for the Eastlink Centre forecast increasing the usage of the facility? Are they trying to get more people to go there, or are they trying to get less people to go there?
Thanks, Mayor Given. We're certainly trying to get more people to go there. I think Council's aware on an annual basis we had an annual membership drive about this time of year, so we aren't doing that this year, but we're looking at different ways of trying to encourage an increase in membership.
And is administration also undertaking steps to increase use of the facility through special events and tournaments and other things?
Thanks, Mayor Given. Yes, we are.
Okay, I don't see anybody else in the queue with questions, and we may have some, appreciating this is a large area. Councillor Clayton, did you have a question? Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Just following on your questions in regards to custodial service, with the addition of large-scale events and whether a new swim meet comes to the facility or an indoor, a 3-on-3 basketball tournament, whatever that may be, I would assume there's still the flexibility to adapt with the staff that will be in existence, or would there be a with a new event coming, there's new revenue, so would there be an opportunity to add additional services as required?
Dr. Miller?
Thanks, Mayor Given. I think we could certainly do that. And we're looking at, it's a citywide initiative as well to, we have custodians in, I guess, separate pockets right now. So we're looking at bringing them under one department in the future, if that's a possibility. And then that would allow us more flexibility as well for shifting resources around as needed.
Okay, Councillor Minhas.
Thank you, Miller. Good question on tourism 25th. That can you explain a little bit more? You said the group will come, but we don't anticipate. Then you just arranging room and board, whatever it was, what we got cutting down.
Okay, that was in regards to large-scale tourism.
Yeah.
Sure. So right now it's 200,000 that we set aside, and then we bring forward recommendations. So the plan would be to reduce it by 150, and set aside 50,000, and then bring a recommendation on which, if we have 2 or 3 applicants, then if we deem they're all worthy of a recommendation to committee, we would divide the pot based on the financials that are provided. And but if we, as an example, I think if I could use the Stampede, I think the last time they came forward, their financials, I think they have over 300,000 in reserves. And yet we still did provide them with some money. So in the future, we'd recommend we don't provide those groups in that financial position to be funded. But other startup events, we'd recommend funding those.
Thank
you. Okay, again, I don't see anybody else in the queue. Last time I said that, though, the queue filled up again. We'll go to Councillor O'Toole for motions arising. Councillor O'Toole.
Mayor Given, thank you very much. I move that items row or line, item 13, 14, 15, 16, and 7 stay in as administration advised us.
So approve reductions.
Thank you.
Council members are making motions to cut things. 13 to 17. Okay.
17.
Okay. Open for discussion and debate. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I would move to split out parks.
Just a request. It doesn't have to be a motion, just so we don't get more motions on the table.
Sorry, I just would like to split out cemetery maintenance.
Cemetery maintenance, okay. Split 16. Are there any other requests for splits? I mean, essentially what we can do is, if people want to have a debate on an individual item, then we can split them out separately. So Councillor Thiessen has requested 16. I would ask to split out 14, East Link Center Management, Administration Programming. And that's the only ones that I had. And are there any other split requests, Councillor Thiessen?
Sorry, just one more clarity. I didn't catch all the numbers there.
13 to 17.
13 to 17? Okay. I kind of want to have, maybe this is more of a committee, but I kind of want to have a discussion on weed control. I heard more spraying, and I'm not a fan of more spraying, but perhaps that's a committee.
Sure. Well, and I think that may be more reflected under item number 18. So we'll do that in the next grouping, and I'd also like to have a discussion about 15 separately. 15. So we've had a request to split 16, sorry, 14, 15, and 16. That would leave 13 and 17. Okay. So we'll have discussion debate on Councillor O'Toole's motion to delete items to approve the reductions as recommended on 13 and 17. Any discussion or debate on that motion? Seeing none, then I will call for the vote. The vote is on Councillor O'Toole's motion to remove items 13 and 17. Thank you. Okay, that motion carries 8-0. 13 and 17, making sure that I'm keeping track. Okay, so then maybe I guess at the top of the list then, item number 14. I asked to have that split, so I'll speak to why I asked to have that. My concern is about the level of service that we have been receiving under the current system at Eastlink Centre. I appreciate that administration over the last couple of years has made some significant operational changes to the facility. And I believe that they've done that with the best intention of ensuring that they keep a high level of service. And I would say that as a user of the facility, it is not kept to the same standard that I experienced at the outset with the facility. That's probably maybe a little bit subjective, but my view is that for a facility that does attract essentially around 3,000 people a day on average, and that we would target to increase, that should be the areas where we deliver the top level of service. If we're literally bringing in a small town in and out of that facility every day, that would be where I would not expect to see overflowing garbage cans or dirty floors, to be really frank. And I think that this is a part of marketing that facility and for residents to be able to take pride in a facility that is honestly a big expense to them. And as a community, we invest a fair bit into that. And I think we should demonstrate our pride in that facility by maintaining it to a high standard. And I think the 78.5 is a reasonable investment in that standard. And I would support administration's further work on custodial services organization-wide. But when I see a recommendation that will lead to a reduced standard in what is a feature facility for our community, it's something that I'm not willing to support. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I wouldn't be able to support that. I spent an awful lot of time at Eastlink facility, and I'm very proud of how clean that facility is. One of the things when I got on council and started realizing some of these areas, I was shocked with how much money we were spending on cleaning that facility. I think this is a good step in the right direction of us getting some costs realigned at the Eastlink Centre. I have no doubt, and I have very high confidence that nobody would even notice that this change had happened. Going in that facility anywhere from 6 in the morning till 10 at night, there's not very often, if you walk through the whole facility, you don't see 3 to 4 custodial people on at any given time, it seems like, when I'm in there. So I can appreciate the city wants to hold ourselves to a higher level of standard than maybe industry, but we're a lot higher than what industry would ever expect on a facility for cleanliness on this one already. So I couldn't support it. I think this is a smart reduction, and I appreciate CLT bringing it forward.
Thanks, Councillor Platt. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I also support the elimination of this amount of dollars. I feel that although there may be times that, as the mayor referenced, there might be the odd garbage can that's full, I don't necessarily think that that's by the level of service. Sometimes there's just staff that aren't doing their job. And I think that right now the facility is under new management, and I have faith in the existing new general manager. I've seen improvements there over the last few months as I'm there fairly regularly. And I think that this is an opportunity for us to save money. And as Councillor Palat mentioned, with little impact. So I do support the removal of this financial amount. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. Any other discussion or debate? Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I guess I'm speaking on behalf of myself and Councillor Blackburn, who also supports Mayor Given's motion to.
No, so just
oh, sorry, yeah,
clear, all
omission.
You and I did was ask to split
yep.
Councillor Toole's motion so we could have discussion and debate on them. This
is going to be confusing for 2 days. So anyways, I'm in favor of maintaining the level of janitorial service and not reducing it any further. I don't frequent the Eastlink Centre, I'll be honest, very often. I go once a month, maybe. I'd like to go more. Within my budget and time, I'm only allowed to go there. But there's been several times that I've been there in my once a month attendance with my son where I've seen some pretty abhorrent, I guess, cleanliness conditions. Hey, the food court, I hate to say bad things about our facilities, but I watched families, myself included, go to the little food court there, order our food, and sit down at a dirty table over and over and over again out of the 7 or 8 tables that are there. It doesn't reflect or represent, and I think a reduction in service this way is only going to make it deteriorate even further. And I think we should have pride in our facilities. We spend a lot of money on the Eastlink Centre, and to maintain it, or at least to expect or even ask for higher levels of service is great. But if we increase the workload and resultantly we get worse service or a less clean facility, then that's what Mayor Given said we're showing the rest of the community. So I'll be voting for 2, but I only have 1. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I don't see anybody else in the queue. Then we'll call for the vote on item number 14, Councillor O'Toole's motion to remove the 78.5 from the budget. Okay, so it's Councillor O'Toole's motion to delete 78.5. I will call for the vote. Please vote. I'm looking for one more, Council. Thank you. That motion does carry. That'll take us to item number 15, which again was something that I raised. I raised this, so the alternate service model, I raised this, I guess, really because I have seen a cycle on this. This is an example of where the city does insourcing, then outsourcing, then insourcing again, then outsourcing. And the evolution that I've seen, particularly in this space, was a desire to increase the level of service by having more city control and influence over the operation. Because we were dissatisfied when it was previously outsourced. So I appreciate other council members may not have experienced that entire cycle. And I will say that there are many situations in our facilities that work well with external service providers. Eastlink Centre is a good example where we have a number of external service providers there. And the Montrose Cultural Centre, again, that facility from day one has had an external service provider. The use at the Coca-Cola Centre, I don't think, has really well lended itself to an external service provider, which means that they can't make a ton of money doing it, and so therefore service ends up dropping off. We've seen that replicated also at Muskogee Park, where there is a kitchen facility there, and nobody's ever been able to make a go of it as a business. There are a few facilities that you choose to deliver this kind of service as an amenity to the overall facility. And for my part, I don't support moving backward in terms of that on this facility. And I do support all those other situations where we've essentially outsourced food services in other facilities. I just don't think it makes sense at this one, so I won't support the motion. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I will be supporting Councillor O'Toole's motion on this. Again, I've spent a lot of time in this facility that way, and I would remind us that you can quite easily walk from the Coca-Cola Centre over to the Eastlink Centre, and there's food services there that are open quite the regular hours. I also don't think it's our role. If there's not an opportunity and if somebody can't make money in something, then we shouldn't be in that space. People bring lunches in. There's other opportunities within the building. This is a nice to have, not a need. If there's a sporting event going on in that facility, I'm more than confident that whoever ends up being there will make sure they're open, because they'll be open because there's people in the building. I think right now there's at times where this is open, there's nobody in the building. And so it's pretty hard for an operator to make money, us included in that, if there's nobody in the facility at the time. I think this realignment will actually save the city money, and I don't see it being a disservice to the community at all. I think that's something they'll have to readjust to. There's no doubt about that. And I apologize for families the first time they come in. They're going to have to readjust. I don't think this is a game changer in our community, though, and it is a lot of money.
Thanks, Councillor Plott. Any other discussion or debate? I don't see anybody in the queue, so we'll call for the vote on Councillor O'Toole's motion on line item number 15 to remove $200,000 from the budget with respect to the Coca-Cola Centre concession. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. And Councillor Thiessen, you had asked to have number 16 split. So I'll ask you to speak to it.
Yes, thank you very much. I would encourage council to maintain this small chunk of our fund. Looking up at the big screen, it's only $20,000 of an impact to mow the lawns in and around the cemetery. Grief is a funny thing, and we all experience it at some point or another in our life. And I think it's our due responsibility to take care of, you know, the plots of which we've laid our families to rest. When people go there, they want to see a nice place. They don't want to see weeds scattered over top in and around their tombstones. They want to see old flowers removed. They want to see a level of service and care that they want to equate to the memories of their past loved ones. And I think as far as a budget item, this is a very small thing out of $20,000, and it's a paid due respect to each and every member of our community who has ever lived in Grande Prairie and was buried or had to bury family members here. So I would strongly encourage council to keep this, as it's such a small item. I don't think it's going to hurt our overall bottom line. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. I'm quite happy to speak to this, and I'm actually in support of the motion to remove this $20,000 from the budget by reduction of one seasonal labor position. This is something that was recommended prior to our former parks manager's retirement, and I know that she is as concerned about the experience of our residents in the cemetery, not the residents in the cemetery, but residents visiting the cemetery and people from outside of the community visiting their loved ones in the cemetery. I spend more time there probably than most of you, and I think that this is not at all an unreasonable reduction in service. With regard to removal of the trinkets and the flowers and things that get left there, it's not unreasonable for those to be removed and not replaced as they are now, because those items are placed there outside of cemetery bylaw anyway. And I just really respect what you're saying, Councillor Thiessen, but I don't think that this is going to result in a disrespectful appearance to our cemetery.
Thanks, Councillor Friesen. I don't see anybody else in the queue. Then we'll call for the vote on Councillor O'Toole's motion to remove the $20,000 from Parks Cemetery Maintenance. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does carry. That handled our first section. I just want to make sure that I got it right in my notes as I'm trying to keep score. Did we do 13 to 17 or 13? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So 17 is dealt with. So now we're looking from 18 on further. Yeah, it is actually 2 o'clock. That's probably an appropriate time to have a bit of a break before we move into dealing with discussion, debate arising on the rest. So we'll take a 15-minute break because I'm realistic about how long it takes us to get back into our chairs. And we'll reconvene at DC 30. have all of our council members here. And so we had just concluded discussion debate on items 13 to 17, and Councillor Minhas had a motion.
Thank you, Mayor Belgiban, and thank you, Arlen. I'll move the motion to approve 18, 19, and 20
Okay, so a motion.
as administration required.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Minhas. A motion to approve the deletions of the amounts reflected under line items 18, 19, and 20. That was mowing U-lots, roadside ditches, irrigation, and weed control at 470,000. Dave Bar administration, 206,000 approximately. And Montrose, Teresa Sargent Hall administration and concourse at 37,000. Any discussion or debate or request to split those items? I've got a couple of folks in the queue, sorry. Councillor Clayton?
Thanks, Mayor Given. Just a question for Director Miller in regards to item number 20. Can you just clarify for me? I thought there was a new vendor in the facility.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Yes, there is a new vendor. It's Jeffries, and I don't know if they're open yet. They're very close to opening up. And then with that new vendor, we should achieve some revenue, some commission sales. And if I could also just clarify on for Day Bar, for the childcare, it'll be half of the 206 roughly, because we have extended it to June 30th. So just so council's aware of that.
So the amount is not actually 206, it's actually 103 and something or other.
Approximately, yes.
Can I have additional to my
Sure, Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. So Director Miller, then can you explain to me where you're getting the savings at 37,000? If the new vendor's already in place, I just don't know where that's coming from in quartile 3.
Thanks, Mayor Given. So my understanding is once a new vendor starts operations, we part of the contract with that vendor is we negotiated a commission of the gross sales. So they will start up very soon, and then they'll be in operation for 2020. And so right now, well, I guess with the previous vendor, we didn't have, there was no revenue for the city. So this is an increased revenue source for us.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Clayton, Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. Just a question to Director Miller. I think I alluded to it before, and it is probably a committee discussion. But in removing our park staff for weed pulling and stuff like that, part of it concerns me that one of our strategies going forward is that it would mean more spraying. And I would hope that we wouldn't replace people with chemicals that might have a negative impact on our environment while we're trying to make it look pretty all at the same time. So I guess I'm just looking to your guidance. It's probably a committee discussion, though, on our policies.
Director Miller?
Thanks, Mayor Given. In number 18, with the discussion with the park staff, that was an option that we would reduce seasonal staff. Now, if we were falling behind on the weed picking, then another option would be to use spray and to catch up and to make the flower beds look better in a more efficient manner, I guess, by using chemicals.
Okay.
No, well, sorry. And I do have one more question, if I may, Mayor Given.
Sure.
This is in reflection to item number 19, the Dave Bar administration. In regards to that, I know we've put out an RFP and that's there. Is there any chance that to change course, or is there legalities that impede us?
Thanks, Mayor Given. We did, there was an RFP put out. We did have one respondent. We're just working through the legalities at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you, Mayor Given. A question about item 18, the parks one. One thing that was mentioned is that this might lead to less planting of trees. I'm curious, does that affect some of the capital programs that involves new trees, such as the cod and psyllid? Apologies if I mispronounced that, but such as the cod and psyllid replacement program or the hillside ARP actions. Would less planting affect those capital projects, or is there other planting covered by operations that this would effect.
Thanks, Mayor Given. My understanding is this won't affect that those other plantings, so we'll still have that program in effect.
Okay. So I just would like to vote on item 18 separately. I'm happy to vote on 19 and 20. So I'll ask to split those. So let's do the vote on 19 and 20. Any discussion or debate on 19 and 20? Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you, Mayor Given. Just I'm going to be voting in favor of these, but it's a hard yes vote for me. As I've shared with council before, I'm still disappointed in the process we took on 19, and yeah, this isn't one that I'm hoping that I like voting yes on, but it's one that I feel where we are and where it's come, I need to vote yes on. It would be irresponsible for us to change course now, but it's not a yes that I'm enjoying making, and I hope that if we have conversations like this in the future, they go differently than this one did.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I'm going to echo Councillor Bressie's comments, but I'm actually going to vote no on this one. I also didn't like the process. We were on, we were off, and now we're getting another person on it. I feel like we could have done better as an organization and maybe as a council and directing the decision making of this. But for me, I'm pretty sure I know and I can feel where it's going to go and what the right thing to do is. I'm going to vote with my heart, and so I can't support this. Thank you.
Okay. So for right now, we're dealing with 19 and 20 together. Okay. Any other discussion or debate on items number 19 and 20? I don't see anybody in the queue, so I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does carry. And then we'll circle back to item number 18. I asked to have that split. The reason that I asked to have that split was because my experience has been that council has set a priority on maintenance of the community and community aesthetics and beautification. That has been a theme that has constantly been brought up by council and a number of council members. And I think that's in response to what we hear from the community. One of the things that residents take the most pride in is the beauty of our community and our green spaces. And it's also one of the things that I think I hear the most about Grande Prairie being a quote unquote dirty city. And I think we do have challenges because we are a community that has significant amount of industry, which we're very fortunate to have. But it means that we need to put more effort into ensuring that our community is kept to a good standard. I would submit that this is the kind of thing where council, if we reduce service in this area, there will absolutely not be a revolution of people beating down our doors, but your inboxes will start to receive more comments from residents dissatisfied with the condition of our community. And I would ask each of you to reflect on whether or not you've heard any of that before now. And I'm willing to bet that at least some of you have, at least sometimes. I'd take that as a bit of a warning sign that the community is not looking to reduce service in this area. And so that's why I won't be supporting the reduction proposed in item number 18. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I'm going to echo your sentiments there. I was actually quite surprised when we reduced our service on mowing and weed control, how much my inbox was impacted by residents calling to complain about the length of the grass, the amount of weeds, the lack of flowers. I love my community, and I wanted to reflect the beauty that I have for it in my heart inside, and I'd hate for us to make a decision where council's already had a question that has said if we want to change course in a year, can we change course? Of course we can change course, but if the suspicion is that we're not going to like the outcome of this, then why would we vote for it on a maybe? So in saying that, I'm in full support of keeping this as a funded item on our list.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. This one's been really hard for me, but I think that I'm going to be voting in support of this. And just as I travel around, I look at other communities. Our less public parks, our non-prime parks, or our right-of-ways beside roads and our ditches. We mow them so much more than I see any other place. It's rare for me to see them even mowed elsewhere. And I think that this is an area where I think there's some clear savings there. I think that I've actually had some people say, hey, I actually like the natural look and I see other places more than I like the look we have here in Grande Prairie. And when I hear people complain about the city and in terms of cleanliness, things like that, they're not talking about our parks. Our parks are pristine. They're talking about things like street sweeping and other aspects like that. So I don't think that this is going to have a huge impact on our community. At the same time, I think that this is something that we should be talking about at the end of summer, and that we should be really proactively revisiting and deciding, did we go too far on this? So I hope that council doesn't, if council does reduce this, I hope it's not a reduce and forget about it. I hope it's a reduce and pay really close attention.
Thanks, Councillor Bressy. Councillor Platt.
Thanks, Mayor Goodwin. This one was a tough one for me too when we started deliberating about it earlier on, and I think I will be supporting it. I think it's something, to Councillor Thiessen's, if maybe you go too far, I think there's a point in our organization we have to test that limit, and I don't think we've tested it quite far enough yet. You may have had your inbox full up. I haven't had a lot of conversations at all about this one. And I agree with Councillor Bressy. I go to a lot of different communities, and one of the things that makes me proud of Grande Prairie is the amount of green space we have, the amount of paths and parks that we have. I think it's probably second to none in the province. So I also do think there's an opportunity here for us to have some natural amenities come back where we're not mowing down some of these areas that we're currently mowing. So I think we need to try this. I think it's a good recommendation from administration. And I'm also okay in a year if we did go too far that we look up coming back. But maybe we're only coming back 100,000. Maybe we're only coming back 150. But I think at some point you have to try stuff and see how it works. And I'll own that. If the community was upset with us, I'll own that one. I think, I'm okay with that. But I think we do have to try this kind of stuff, and I do recommend that we support this.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Platt. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor. Given question for Director Miller in regards to the RFP in the fall this year. I may have missed it, but can you tell me, because I'm assuming this RFP was already done, and if so, what were you able to find out from it?
Thanks, Mayor Given. We had, administration had several meetings with Director Glavin and Robert Carroll as well, and other park staff. And then we also talked to procurement about the previous, I think it was an expression of interest that we did 10 months ago or whatever the time was. So we made a decision that we're not going to proceed with an RFP at this time. We feel that in talking to Robert with the new management team in place, with Robert leading the integrated department, we think we can find efficiencies that the RFP wouldn't have found us additional efficiencies. So we're confident that they can provide a very good product for us in the future, and we'll retain at in-house, I guess, versus contracting out.
Thank you. If I may,
go ahead.
Mayor Given, thank you. I will support the removal of this service. I do believe that when you travel and I have family in Vancouver, which is considered a very beautiful city in the world, and you get off the plane and you drive through some open green spaces, and because we're so used to everything being mowed so shortly here, I'm like, why is that, the open space so long, and you get used to it, and it becomes more of a natural look. And I think that Grande Prairie, on certain levels, we've been very, very fortunate with the services that we've received over the years, and sometimes we take those services for granted, and everybody will say that if you can't park at the front door of a building here, you assume there's bad parking, and so at some point we need to be realistic in what the level of service we provide is, and so if the grass is a little bit longer, I think that's okay. If it gets where it's unkept in the sense that it looks like there was no plan for it, that's a different story. I don't think administration is saying there's no plan for this. They're simply going to have less level of service than we're used to. It doesn't mean it's a bad level of service. It's just less than we're used to. So, and I think that somebody, maybe Councillor Platt, addressed the fact that if we don't encourage people to be creative with what they're given, they're never going to try to be creative. So, if it meant that there are fewer flower beds certain places, maybe there's service groups that want to plant the flower beds. Maybe we have community groups that want to help beautify our city. It doesn't always have to be the ultimate level of service provided by the city of Grande Prairie. So I will support the elimination of this. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I will support this one with relish. I am a big fan of leaving things natural when they can be left natural. And I think if we have more, doing this will also encourage us to look more at Indigenous plants and things like that require less maintenance anyway. I drove across Canada last summer and to Montreal and then back through the US. And this is one thing. I looked at this and construction in all the cities that I went through. And this is one thing that I thought, geez, there are some cities that just look beautiful with slightly longer grasses, more in indigenous plants and grasses, and I hope that is the direction that we can go in. So I'm and it's just even the carbon footprint of maintaining all of these. I'm actually a little surprised at you. Being in support of Councillor Thiessen wanting to continue the level of mowing that we're doing. I think that the more you mow, the more irrigation you need, and perhaps the less green and lush things look. And I'm supporting this one with a big smile on my face. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Friesen. Councillor Thiessen.
Oh, thank you very much, Mayor Given, and thank you, Councillor Friesen. I do relish things getting a little long, if you can't tell by my hair every now and again. But it's here that I have a lot of hesitation and reservation. I know it's a carbon footprint that Councillor Friesen alluded to, and I know that there are potentials to have savings. I'm still going to vote no. I know I kind of feel how it's going, but just to answer to what Councillor Palat said earlier, once upon a time ago, we had a Cadillac snow removal service. We had a very harsh winter, and we removed the Cadillac service. At the time, we were told that it was an impact of close to $1 million or more that our Cadillac service cost us. We removed it from the program, and a couple of years later, in fact, came back, and it's only going to cost us $350,000. So there's possibly room for efficiencies here. I think I know where council is going with this. I'm not 100% against it, but I'm also not 100% for it. So I'm just going to vote with my heart, and we'll see how it all plays out. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I don't see anybody else in the queue, so we are on Councillor Minhas's motion to reduce the budget by $470,000 in the area of Parks Administration and Operations. Please vote. In favor means you're in favor of that reduction. Thank you. That motion does carry. And so we will move on. We're looking for, we still have in this service area, items 21 to 29. Councillor Bressie.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Given. Actually, before we move on, I'm considering a follow-up motion to the motion we just passed.
Sure, please.
And I'm kind of looking at both council and administration with two questions. First of all, council, I feel that this decision we just made should be reviewed a bit more robustly than will be allowed in next budget deliberations. I think this should be a committee level discussion. So kind of looking at my council colleagues, see if others have that sentiment. And then I'm also kind of looking at administration, wondering if I would like to have this reviewed at committee. Is that something that I should make a motion for, or is that something that could be added in the due course of work? Or just, if I want to review, what would be the advice right now?
Well, we'll have less administration in parks, so I'm not sure who's going to write the report, but I'll look to Director Miller.
And sorry, could I just clarify what I'm asking? I'm not even necessarily suggesting that we get a report back from it, but I'd like us to have it. I'd like us to trigger an informal council discussion of, do we want to relook at this? So I'm not saying in 6 months I want a written report about it, but when we're getting towards the end of summer, I want to make sure the council has a discussion about this.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We will be tracking for sure all changes we're talking in this budget deliberation. There are many changes. So we plan to track everything and monitor and perhaps do a summary at the end of the season for winter operations, at the end of summer for all the parks changes. So if that could be a report going to a committee in the form of a summary. And at that time, if opportunity for council to see what went right, what went wrong, and propose some adjustments if there is a need.
Councillor Brest, does that help you out at all?
Yeah, if that process is happening, then I'd be really excited about that process.
Councillor Thiessen.
Well, I just wanted to echo my excitement over City Manager's comments there. I see the same thing as Councillor Bressie is, as a full review on the grass and our public lots, like we have on snow removal as well, to make sure that we're not negatively impacting the community. So I'll appreciate this coming forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. So I'm looking for additional motions to help move us through the agenda and continue on through the community services area. We have items 21 to 29. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I would move that we remove, or I guess we're all removing. So item 22, transit, the realignment of admin supervisory staff resulting.
Okay, so Councillor Thiessen has made a motion that Council approve the reduction proposed on line 22 for 280,000 in the transit area with the realignment of admin supervisory staff. Open for discussion debate. I don't see anybody in the queue, Council, going once, going twice. Then I will call for the vote. Please vote on Councillor Thiessen's motion on line number 22. Thank you. That motion carries. We can move on to other items that Council wishes to address. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I would move that Council remove the budget item community group funding, item number 24 as presented.
24. Okay, so Councillor Thiessen has a motion on item number 24 as presented. Any discussion or debate on that item? I just want to clarify, Director Miller, so can you clarify what items this included and where else in the budget they're reflected? I appreciate that you said that they were duplications and that they're reflected somewhere else. So I just want to...
Yeah. Thanks, Mayor Given. And I don't have, I'm not sure of the line item where it was duplicated, but unless Stephanie can recall where it was. I know we did talk to finance about it and confirmed it was duplication. But I just can't recall exactly where it was. Okay, so she's saying part was included in lease agreements and then in community group funding.
So will this actually reduce amounts provided to community groups as basically cash grants?
No, I don't believe it will. It's the amount was already set for 2019 and so.
Okay. Okay, thanks for answering those questions and bringing that clarification. Any other discussion or debate on Councillor Thiessen's motion on item number 24? Seeing none, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. Mayor Given, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we skipped over 21, didn't we?
We didn't skip anything. Council members are making motions.
No, but I mean, as
Councillor Thiessen didn't choose to make a motion on that.
There is no motion made on 21. Okay.
That's correct.
You know what? I'm going to make that motion. I'm going to move that that council follow the recommendation to remove $220,000 from the budget as recommended in number 21 with transit.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Friesen. So that motion with respect to transit hours of operation to remove $220,000, as you said, open for discussion and debate. Councillor Bressie.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Given. I'm very strongly opposed to this motion. I hope that Council will defeat it. I'm very concerned with with the decisions we've been making as a council regarding transit. I'm very proud of the work our administration's doing to make the service better from an efficiency operation. They've done great work, both making it a more pleasant customer service experience and also, I think, just making it more cost effective. So I'm very proud of the work admin's doing. I'm very disappointed with decisions council's made around transit. And just reminding council, when we started our term, there was a brand new adopted transit master plan that promised all transit riders very improved transit experience. And that master plan, there were issues with it. We're not moving forward with it. We're not doing anything with it. And I'm okay with that because I don't think that master plan, as I got into it, really was a way forward. But we also haven't really done anything to show transit users that we are going to give them a better service. What we have done is we've increased fares and we've already reduced service on a number of routes. We haven't done that with what I consider proper consultation of the people that ride those routes. We haven't done only really robust consultation was back when we were adopting that transit master plan last term. And I feel that we can't just keep on reducing transit if we don't have plans for how we're going to improve it. And I really do strongly feel that if route changes are going to be made, that people should have ability to give feedback before we make those route changes, not after we've made those route changes. So I really hope that transit will, or that council will not support this motion. I think we need to do better by the people riding transit.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Ditto, Councillor Bressie. Thank you very much for putting that so eloquently. We have funded and resourced and taken federal and provincial grants to expand our transit system to get better buses, electric buses, more sustainable buses. We've taken on DTS, so now we also have drivers, extra drivers as well. In a sense, it seems almost backwards that we would reduce the service while increasing the funding to the actual product that we want to have. Like, we haven't even started talking about capital replacements yet or capital programs, but we have bus shelters that are on there that are going to go around the city and future things that I guess we're not going to talk about this year. So I just think this is a point of penny wise, pound foolish. It's a big number, I understand that, but I mean, we put big numbers into our transit to try to make a better system and hopefully one day the best system. I don't think we get there by reducing hours of service, especially in the evenings, which is when most students and high school students who don't have rides to and from their places of work or their places of leisure to get there. I'm thinking about the disabled persons who can't drive themselves as well, who don't also need DTS to get to and from their different locations. They require transit. I just think it's sort of a backwards thing. The final thing is Councillor Clayton made it earlier, is like if you don't get a parking stall right by the front door, it's not right. It's horrible parking. Well, that's sort of the same thing with transit users. You make it harder for them to use, and you encompass more of their time to plan their routes or when their bus is coming. And even when the buses are an hour between each other, sometimes they still arrive late. You're just inconveniencing the system. So if we're going on this course, then why do we even have a transit department at all? So I would strongly encourage people to not support this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I have a comment, but first a question for administration. Director Miller, can you tell me, from the changes that we've made so far that were referenced by my fellow councillors, what kind of feedback have we had to date? I know personally I've received no emails about changes in service or increase in fees, so I'm curious internally if your department has had much feedback.
Director Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I recently did ask Mr. Harvard if we were receiving a lot of complaints or concerns, and we've received some, but not a significant number. Recently, I was in the contact center one day, and I saw the map of the transit map was up on the screen, and I asked the lady who was operating that station if she was receiving a lot of calls, a lot of concerns, and she wasn't either. So to the best of my knowledge, we aren't receiving, administration hasn't. I'm not sure if council has, but...
Thank you. So I do support the elimination of this for a few things, and I'll address a couple of comments that were made by fellow councillors. I agree with you, Councillor Thiessen. We have made improvements to our transit fleet, or bus fleet. We've found efficiencies through replacing models. We've also in turn increased rates. I agree with that. I have employees that work in my small business that catch the bus. I know people in hospitality that catch the bus. My own son catches the bus, and the bulk of the people that I know that catch the bus think it's a great service. And just because we want to reduce certain routes and certain times, it doesn't mean the service is going to be any less great. And just because we're finding efficiencies in the fleets that we have, and we're doing great things, it doesn't mean we can't continue to tweak it to make the service great. By offering a full gamut of service doesn't mean it's a great service. So if administration is recommending that there be some routes that are depleted, and there are some things in here that I also think are really important, because I don't know what percentage of them, but replacing large bus with smaller community buses on peak periods, transit users will see a decline in services. But it doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to catch the bus when they need to. There's very few people on some of the buses in the evening. And so to find these efficiencies, they go hand in hand with the other efficiencies that we've found. So this is just tweaking it even a little bit more. And with Director Miller's comments in regards to not getting a lot of feedback, and I personally haven't got any feedback, I do support the elimination of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Flayton. I've got a few people in the queue. I'm just going to say that I won't be supporting the motion for this reduction. I put it in contrast with the driveway snow clearing, where we said people will be inconvenienced because they may not be able to get out of their driveway, or they may need some help or to put in some physical effort. My view is that these are reductions in hours of service that are very meaningful to people who don't have other modes of transportation, or their other modes of transportation will be more costly. And so in terms of the things that I would be willing to spend money on, convenience type service like the driveway snow clearing, I didn't have a problem making a motion to reduce that because I'm in support of things that are more directly impactful to people's lives, that like these hours of service. And so I won't support the motion to do the reduction. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Mr. Miller, I was wondering if you could tell me if we did customer satisfaction surveys on the bus. I remember at one time we were going to engage in that. I just wondered if we followed through and what the results were.
Dr. Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I know we did a public engagement survey on transit some time ago, and I'm just hoping Mr. Burke can help me out on the results.
Mr. Burke. You'll just have to get your microphone if you're down in the queue, and so if you're jumping in, you need to turn your own mic on.
Thanks, Mayor Given. That particular engagement wasn't limited specifically to users. That was broadly sought views of the community. I don't recall the last specific bus user survey, although there was one in the last 3 years, but I don't recall the date.
And just a follow-up question, there was some routes that obviously I think we're looking at right now, that the ridership was less than 5 people on. That's why the administration had decided to remove that route. Is that correct?
Miller?
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'm not sure the exact number of how many riders.
Neither am I, sorry.
But I know Mr. Harvard did a thorough review of all the routes, and these are his recommendations to achieve this amount of savings. So it's his best information that he has, where it would be the least amount of impact to the riders.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Platt.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'm also going to support this. I guess for me, when we talk about efficiencies, one of the things that concerns me is when I watch buses run around our city, and they're usually at evenings. I feel like we get good utilization during the day, but the evenings and reductions we're talking about, I've watched many of these buses drive around empty. And so from an environmental footprint, if we're worried about that, I don't, whether it's solar or not, because solar doesn't come with no cost to the environment. We're just running around empty buses sometimes, and I think this is, to me, is just something that we have to look at. I can appreciate Councillor Deason's and Mayor Given's comments that, you know, there are people that may be displaced from this, and that's unfortunate for those few people that are. It's a big cost. The other thing I want to remind us is we did have the college here, and I took a picture of their presentation. 10 people out of the people responded actually rode the transit. That was their own internal college survey. 10 people rode the transit, and it didn't break that down to tell you when they wrote it, but if we probably could have dissected that a bit more, it might not even impacted anybody from the college, you know. And so I'm concerned that we're splitting hairs over something here, which is a big dollar amount. If our administration is willing to recommend this, and our director of this area is comfortable with this, I think again this is something we try. And here, if we went too far, I'm okay with revisiting that.
Thanks, Councillor Platt. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I'm just going over my community survey results that we all received in preparation for this budget. I'm just going to read a couple things based off of public transit. From April 5th to May 5th, 2019, 184 visitors participated in this survey. 61% were regular transit users. A significant finding of this is that 90% of responders thought public transit was important for the city of Grande Prairie, as it provides freedom of mobility for those who are unable to drive and reduce traffic congestion and pollution. Of the responders who were not regular transit users, better direct route networks were noted as the main incentive to make them more likely to try the GP transit system. The most consistently expressed request in terms of improvements was the call for routes running in both directions. So a reduction of our route schedule is actually going contrary to what the general public who responded to this survey actually requested and noted as what would make a transit system a lot more efficient and effective by I guess taking two of the wheels off the bus. It's not going to go round and round. So I encourage everybody to not support this.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you, Mayor Given. Just I'm not going to rehash what I said before, but just to address two things I've heard is one is talk about empty buses, which is a concern I have too. The community is not served by an empty bus going around. But I know as I'm approaching transit, the big metric I'm looking at is how much are we paying per ride on a bus. I'm not so concerned with getting the total transit budget down. I'm concerned with doing a lot more with that transit budget, and that means getting more people on those buses when we're running them. And I really think that reducing evening service is really risky in terms of driving people away from transit altogether. Why would you go on that why would you, people who might be on that busy 3 o'clock route might not do that busy 3 o'clock route anymore if they know they can't get home at the end of the evening. So let's be careful with service reductions, because it might get that really important metric down, which is the amount of people are getting on per ride. The other thing I want to point out is the GPRC survey was brought up, and yes, only 10 people in that survey said they use transit, but also I want to point out that only 55 people filled out that survey. 18.6, I've got it in front of me, 18.2% of respondents said that they use transit. So if that survey is representative, which 55, who knows, but if 18% of GPRC students are actually using transit, then I'd suggest that survey actually is showing it's a very important component of GPRC.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. I don't see anybody else. Thank you. And I think we had a good opportunity for a round of discussion on Councillor Friesen's motion. Councillor Friesen, would you like to close?
I would. Thank you, Mayor Given. So I'd like to remind everyone of the language in the impact here. This is to explore options for removing splits on some routes, to consider reducing hours of service for evenings, to replace large bus with smaller community bus on select routes for peak service. So this is not an arbitrary wholesale dismissal of evening routes. It is not going to be an unstudied approach as I read this. Regarding the passage that Councillor Thiessen just read, that X number of people would consider using transit if there were more routes. We're not going to blindly put more routes out there in hopes of capturing these handful of people who would consider using transit. This is a way to what seems to be an administration-approved, reasonable approach to reducing our transit or reducing our transit budget by differently looking at transit. And that's what I think we need to do. We're heading into a time when we don't want to see empty buses. We want to reduce the cost per ride, and we need to get creative about how we do that. And this is something that encourages administration to do so. So I would really encourage my colleagues to support this, understanding that it is not an arbitrary wholesale slashing of routes. Thank you.
Thanks for that close on the motion. I will call for, we had a good round of discussion and debate. I appreciate this. If you have a question for administration? Okay, question for administration? Sorry, Councillor Bressie, there you go.
Sorry, I've got a question because I appear to be understanding this different than Councillor Friesen. If this motion passes, would the route reductions mentioned, would those be explored or would those be implemented?
Director Miller?
Thanks, Mayor Given. So my understanding in the information that was provided by Mr. Harvard, and I know just looking at the chart, it does say explore, but I believe it would be to implement some of these changes. And it could be fine-tuned during the process, but to achieve the savings that we've noted here, we definitely are going to have to make some changes.
Councillor Bressie, you got your answer. So we will call for the vote on Councillor Friesen's motion to reduce the transit budget by $220,000 as proposed in line 21. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does carry. And what other motions arising? We've got a few others to deal with there, Council. Councilor Minhas.
I'll move the 25, 26, 27 as administration requested to take the off.
Okay, so 25 to 27, Councillor Minhas, as recommended. I had a whole bunch of people just jump in the queue. Were those all for discussion debate, or are there any requests to split before we get into discussion debate? Okay, so we've got a couple. I see Councillor Palat was the first in the queue with a request to split. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'd just like to request to split out number 25, please.
Number 25 as a split, okay. Were there any other requests to split separate? Okay, well then it sounds like there was only 3 there. If we request to split it any further, then we're just gonna deal with them all separately. So let's just start at the top and do 25. So we'll deal with all 3 separately. They're all Councillor Minhas's motion. And we'll have discussion debate on item number 25. Okay, open for discussion debate on item number 25, which proposes to cut $150,000 from the large-scale tourism funding. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Just before just a quick question for administration on this. I just want to clarify if I'm understanding this correct. If this fund doesn't get fully utilized, the money just gets put back into general operating.
Dr. Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Given. It's my understanding it just goes into the surplus for that that budget year.
Okay. Thank you for that. So I'm going to propose an amendment on this. So I'd like to make a motion that we don't use the recommendation that's presented in front of us, but actually go to $100,000 total for this, which would be a reduction of $50,000. And to speak to that, I think realistically, we've had Bear Creek Folk Festival, we had the Stompede coming last year's, we had the fastball come last year, or earlier this year. And I think if we limit it to $50,000, we may only be able to do one event, or we may be put in a spot where we can't even potentially do one event. And so for me, I think this is an economic development piece. And so I'm fine with $100,000 going there. I wouldn't probably support more than $100,000, but I think $100,000 is a safe number. We could still look at 2 to potentially 3 events a year. And looking at some of the events we've had in the past, I know there's been conversation whether that'll come to fruition or not, but about maybe weaning some of those groups off of funding as well. So my motion would be that we fund it for only $100,000.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Platt. So Councillor Platt's making a specific motion to amend on item number 25 to reflect an amount of $100,000. So basically, it was 200. It would now, on your motion, would be reflected as $100,000 left there. Discussion debate on Councillor Palat's amendment. Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Councillor Platt. I think there's the opportunities for events to be continued with $100,000 in fundraising. Taking it down to $50,000 would probably limit the amount and what we could do with that amount. So I'm fair.
Okay, thanks, Councillor O'Toole. Any other discussion debate on Councillor Palat's amendment? Seeing nobody ringing in, then I'll call for the vote on Councillor Palat's motion to amend this to reflect a $100,000 reduction rather than $150,000. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. So we go back to item number 25 as amended. Any discussion or debate on item number 25 as amended to reflect, which would reflect a reduction of $100,000? Seeing none, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. And then, so we did have others that wanted to split apart the other pieces, so we'll deal now with item number 26 with respect to the museum. There were a couple of council members that maybe wish to speak to this. Were there any council members that were looking to split things that wanted to speak to this item around the museum? I don't see any, and Councillor Minhas already has a motion to approve this reduction as presented at the $24,000. If there's no discussion or debate on that motion, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. And then we're on to item number 27. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I think the information I need from this item would probably be in camera, so I would like to make a motion that we go in camera regarding item 27.
Okay, so fair enough. Council's looking for some detailed information. I'll call for the vote to go in camera. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries, so we'll go in camera and we'll call anybody that's here back in. Members of administration will stay to support council's decision making and information on this.